so right now we're getting about a 60% gap subsidy based on the appraised value of the land plus 60% of the property condition reports and other estimates of construction costs. And I wanted to find out if there was going to be any impact on those current subsidy limits for manufactured dwelling parks. I had heard previously that there was some concern about the amount of the gap funds that manufactured dwelling parks were receiving. And so just wanted to kind of air that out in this group.
All right, thank you. I mean, part of this engagement again is to inform us, educate us. So there's no decision one way or another how some of those may change or not. So, but I think so. If there, I guess my question is if there's. Well, I guess what's your suggestion?
Right.
What
so we had proposed an increase to the gap subsidy limits for this program based on the increasing costs of manufactured dwelling parks. I mean, it's a tremendous increase of over 430% since 2019, I believe, in the price of manufactured dwelling parks. They've become a high demand asset class for real estate investors. So there's just more demand for them, and we're dealing with more competing offers. So we had asked for an evaluation of an increase in the subsidy. We received it, and then also most of the parks that we are able to successfully negotiate on are older and in need of infrastructure improvements. So that's why construction costs are also going up for these particular parks. So we're just kind of in a tough situation with these manufactured dwelling park acquisitions because of the increasing price points, and then the parks that we are able to successfully compete on are older and in need of infrastructure, high infrastructure costs. So OHCS had approved that increase in the subsidy last year, or no, I think beginning this 2023, and we're very grateful for it and would propose that it continue to be maintained. It may not work real well. The 60% of construction cost is not working that well for very small parks that have major infrastructure improvement needs. And so that would be the only maybe reconsideration is for those small parks.
Okay. And is it, I mean, just to, I guess, elaborate a little bit more, is it the cost of the land that is also as part of it, and the infrastructure
yeah, I mean, it's just the overall, the real estate asset is just in high demand among investors, and so it does definitely include the land and infrastructure, just what we're paying for as part of the land acquisition. The appraised value is based on the land and improvements to that land.
And Rose, I'm noting this on the Easy Retro board, and I just want to let other people who are in the room know we have an Easy Retro board. The link is in the chat, and we'd love for you to I'll be taking notes on comments and putting them on the Easy Retro board, but you can also directly
great, thank you,
add comments to it. You just push the little, you click on the plus at the top of each column, and you can add a comment. And so Rose, just wanting to make sure the 60% of infrastructure costs is not working well for small parks. And I believe it's because the infrastructure costs are great and there are fewer spots to attribute those.
Correct. I mean, we have one example where the purchase price was 2.5 million and the infrastructure cost was, I believe, around 1.2 million. So in that example, it's we're a bit short of funding for that particular project.
And this is Rachel from NOAA. I will chime in here. I work with Rose on a lot of these, and just wanted to add that there are a couple things that I think are really important to consider when setting aside funding for these. First, that a really excellent source of naturally occurring affordable housing, as everybody knows already. But a lot of times the infrastructure is so expensive because really the owner has not done any work and also or upgrades to the infrastructure for basically usually the whole time it's been in investor ownership. And a lot of the parks or the communities were built around the same time. So they're all kind of, having infrastructure failures around now or, in the last few years. And so investors are looking to, offload their investment so they don't have to address those really, really expensive, costly upgrades. And then just want to echo that those smaller parks are, I think, right now impossible. I don't think anybody's figured out how to preserve them under the current structure, just because like Rose was saying, the infrastructure upgrades are so great.
All right, thanks, Rachel. So that I think is speaking to probably the first question that we want to explore with you, maybe on the location of project, the project type, meaning here manufactured home parks. Anybody else? And we can put the second question, but I wanted to at least have a chance to see if the first one can generate other thoughts, feedback. What's happening? Do you see something's happening on my screen? Do you have the same?
I see it. You just might need to click the close button. There's like an X in the corner here.
I just did anyway, but it's there.
That's interesting. I have no idea what that is.
Fascinating. Here, close whiteboard. There, I did.
There you go. It's
Oh,
there.
whiteboard. Oh, that was the whiteboard function. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. We got it. Now we can keep talking.
Yeah.
Technology issues today.
All right. And anything else on that first question? I think what I said in the short presentation, again, there are some hardwired subsidy caps. Home, federal funding, it does establish it, HUD establishes that we can't do a whole lot. But again, I think on some of the state resources, there's probably more room in there to be, if not flexible, at least be creative in how we can make sure that. And I think Rachel pointed out about the set aside. So the subsidy limits is tied also to the set asides in more than one way. I'm trying to get there. Copy the second question if you're ready to move on to the next one. So the second question, which is again there are projects, so not every project has the same size, or not every project needs the total full subsidy. Sometimes it's possible to do it with smaller. And so the question is, for those projects that need lower amount of subsidy, is there a different process by which they can get funded instead of going through the full cycle? And so what we heard last year, or maybe at the end of this, what we heard this year with the preservation, that helped a lot with small projects, meaning that they could just apply, come in, first come, first serve, reviewed, and recommended for funding. It's hard to be, as a small project, to be among larger ones because it takes time to go through all of them. So that's the question that is open or on the table.
So are you suggesting that instead of having a small projects NOFA, you would allow people to just come in with a small project, first come, first serve?
That's one way of envisioning it.
But with project that needs lower subsidy, right? So project that has other funding sources.
Hmm.
I would think instead of many of our small projects in them over the past few years with it, when they've come in for small project, they have had either no other resources or maybe one other resource, other like funding source coming in. So I don't so
Well, yeah,
I
that's
don't see
true.
those needing us, those are not maybe necessarily needing us a lower subsidy.
Have you ever seen this as needed for new construction or just for preservation or rehab? Just that.
I've only really seen it for preservation, but
Yeah.
Roberta may have another.
No, I was going to say the same thing. But I think you're right, Nora, meaning, well, it's unlikely, but it's possible that a large project could come in with many other leverage resource, private investment, other jurisdiction funding, and there's just a small remaining gap and so that's the lower subsidy. So it's possible, yes, but doesn't happen very often. But I think we want to explore if that's possible. Do we establish a criteria that, yeah, you've got the rest of the funding, you need a smaller amount from the state in order to move forward? Yeah.
I would say that rehab preservation first come first serve was a nice resource. The first come first serve thing that doesn't have a ton of notice of when it's coming out was really hard. Like when it was released, tried to get a CNA right away and tried to apply, and by the time we came in to apply, it was all gone, kind of a thing. So I think the first come first serve, that's like just an open rolling thing, is interesting, but I feel like you would still have a NOFA, but it's first come first serve.
Okay.
I feel like I have a comment or a question on the first question.
Yeah.
I'm also just curious on so when you're talking about subsidy limits, you're talking about when, like in the last LIFT NOFA, you gave points for if you were only getting this much subsidy per unit, you would get less points if you did this much subsidy per unit. Is that what you're talking about? And you're considering adjusting that point structure per subsidy based on these factors?
Go ahead.
Roberta, go ahead. Well, I was going to say, I think if we're thinking about adjusting the maximum subsidy per unit, that or the way that we're providing subsidy. So, as you know, going forward, we are not going to have many individual NOFAs, right? We are working to consolidate our fund offering, and I think we're looking to also make more consistent the subsidy that we provide among or across programs, maybe, right? Because right now, if you like the small project NOFA maximum subsidy is totally different than the LIFT subsidy, which is different than the preservation. Maybe that is different because it's different anyway. But we're trying to make things more predictable and consistent among resources so that it takes a lot. Like I think it would be easier for applicants or sponsors to know what they can get from us. Anyway.
Yeah, and then you're meaning with Nora, about the LIFT in the current process that we have. If you ask for a lesser amount of the maximum subsidy, you get scoring points. That unintentionally led a lot of applicants and developers to ask for little because they wanted the points, but that really sometimes maybe didn't reflect the true cost of the project. Then unintentionally now created a funding gap when they get to closing and say we don't have enough. So that's part of also, I guess, what we're trying to address is there a way that we can assess how much truly a project costs? And maybe then again in that consolidated approach, because it's possible to work with more than just one funding source now, maybe that can be addressed as well. But so it's, yeah, we're trying to, I guess, address that challenge, because underbidding, under proposing has led us to again seeing a lot of funding gaps. I mean, albeit many other financial conditions in the market as well that impacts the ability of people, of developers, to get all of the funding that they need.
That is absolutely true. As someone who competed and we submitted 2 lift applications last year, and in order to be really competitive and needing to get a project funded, we cut lots of things out of the project in order to request the lowest subsidy per unit so that it would be competitive. Things that like we probably should have kept in the project. And I'm not even saying we have a gap in funding. Who knows? We'll be closing in the spring, late spring, but things that will probably be better off long-term in the project, we decided to cut in order for it to be more competitive. And so I think that there are like really hard decisions that are being met, and we're getting less amenities that residents really should have, and et cetera. Related to that, I understand there's limited funding, right? And there's only a certain way you're trying to like give points to people who need less subsidy. I think there are a lot of unintended consequences, especially when we're talking about, like, I wish I was also in the construction costs breakout session, because, you know, one of the issues is in order for us to fully rely on a construction estimate at schematic or conceptual design, we need to have 10% contingency just for design, not even talking about an inflation contingency to when we close. And you can't afford that trying to get a competitive subsidy limit. So there are hard decisions. I will say too, it's really hard with the subsidy per limit when you're talking about, you know, I like the idea of it maybe changing based on if you are doing all studio apartments versus a lot of 3 bedrooms. It doesn't seem fair. And location, I think, is a big factor as well. The other thing and comment I wanted to make was it doesn't seem, I don't know the last time, especially for Lyft, that the state had increased subsidy limits. And I do know when putting together budgets this last year, it was very, very difficult. Even if we weren't trying to compete with the points, just getting to the maximum and getting a project to pencil, because construction costs like keep increasing year to year. The subsidy limit, I know, hadn't increased since the previous lift round. And with the interest rates rising, you know, we can afford less of a perm loan on a project. And because construction costs are increasing more, and because of the interest rate market, like tax credit pricing is coming down, creates a much bigger gap. And the fact that the subsidy limit isn't increasing to help with that is a real struggle on projects. So that's the point that I wanted to bring to the table here. That was a real struggle for us and will continue to be in the next couple of years.
Thank you, Nora. No, I think that's, I think in my.
I didn't want to interrupt. There was one more point that I need to get off my chest.
Go ahead.
Which was trying to do a project comboing Lyft with 4% that's not in a qualified census tract is nearly impossible. And one of the projects that we're working on is in the coast. It is not in a qualified census tract, so we can't get the basis boost. And I think that should be considered when talking about subsidy limits, because that was the other issue that we had in penciling out that deal.
And I think this is Rachel again from NOAA. Just wanted to add that in our portfolio, what we've been seeing, especially on the asset management side, is I think in order to, like what Nora was saying, in order to get enough points to be competitive, there are things that are being removed. And I think that we've been seeing lately, because of that and a lot of other things, that the operations have been suffering. And you know, like with the pressure to score the maximum amount of points in the system, that is occurring currently, it's hard to see how that will support the long-term operations of a healthy development. And you know, how the developers will then be able to support their residents for the long term. And I don't have any like great ideas to fix everything either. But you know, I just wanted to raise that as a concern, because we are seeing that pretty consistently throughout our portfolio, that I think the struggle, especially in the with the properties that are like in the first 5 years right now, there are some that are really struggling, and we haven't really seen that in our portfolio in the past. And I think we have a general consensus that maybe some adjustments were made that are causing those operations to not be lining up with what we underwrote.
Thanks, Rachel. I think I saw we only have what, 3 more minutes, Kim? Well, so I just pasted, copied the last question in there. It sounds like I think there are some policies, directions that we could think about. I'm going back to your comment, Nora, about what happens when the market tanks or is going down. I mean, is there a way to establish something like that? Meaning, if it's not, well, I guess adding funding gap to a project that has a financial funding gap, that by itself increases the subsidy limit, right? And we saw that with the in the most recent couple of years, that when we established the market cost offset fund as a way of filling gap. I mean, if we had like a hard set core or hard set subsidy limits, we would have not been able to add any funding gap. But anyway, so I think the market conditions is one to for us to keep in mind as well. And Rachel is right. I think the financial setup at the beginning, I mean, in a way, dictates how the project will operate into the future. And so I think if we set them up right, financially sound at the beginning, hopefully that we won't see their financial challenges as they operate as well.
One thought I have in this final question, I know we gotta jump off, but is I feel like there's a way that you can give points for people who have leveraged other funds, maybe based on a percentage or something, that is not then taking away points just because they're asking for more subsidy. So I think the points can maybe end up there, so that 2 projects that have the same amount of leveraged funds, you know that you can confidently go in and ask for the subsidy you need without there being points taken away from you. If you've already done, so you could have already leveraged other funding and still be going in for a maximum subsidy limit. And so you're kind of getting, it feels like dinged twice a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Well, and we're still, again, the rural and very rural communities where there is not other resources. There's no tax base to generate participation from the local jurisdiction. So there's a lot to think about, and that's why we appreciate you joining us here. And any other thoughts? I think they haven't kicked us out of this room yet, so we can stay.
Just one more plug for
Please.
taking a look at the Easy Retro board and adding I've tried to keep up with things y'all are saying. I did my best, but you can also, if you can just make sure that I captured things like I'm sorry, Nora, I missed you. I understood your last comment, but I did not get it on the retro board yet. And we're also recording this session, so we can go back and catch things we haven't, but it's also great to hear it in your own words, whoever's commenting, just because, you know, having me trying to translate it into a like soundbite on a retro board is not always the best. So thank you. Just thank you for all the comments, and yeah, please take a look and see if I got it right or what I missed, or if you have other ideas that you maybe didn't say.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank
One more
you.
thing from Rachel. Just want to plug that we're really looking forward to OHCS's guarantee program rolling out. I think that could be a really big opportunity for a lot of lenders to, you know, strengthen the public-private finance relationship.
Great, thanks. All right, thank you, everyone. We'll see you in the larger room.